Last week about art as a religion, as symbolized by this cross. And this cross is not a Christian cross. It is a cross that means devotion to art, a religious devotion to art. When I was in art college, this was 40 years ago, 1967 through 69. In 1968, I had gone to college I was a printer at the time, working nights as a journeyman printer, and they had a graphics department. And I thought, well, maybe I could get into the graphics department, and I would enjoy that better than the printing. So I decided to go to art college, California College of Arts and Crafts, to get a degree in graphics, graphic design. And so I went during the days, and I had to take because I was a degree candidate, I had to take all the regular classes, color workshop, some of the beginning classes, lettering, things of that nature, and I also had to take English. And because in art schools now, usually, well, at least I don't know how it is now, but back when I was in art school, if a class started at 9, you're lucky if the professor got there at 9:30. Most of the time it was 10 o'clock. And the same with the students. Nobody showed up on time. It was just always, they just drift in whenever they wanted. But because I was 32 years old, I was disciplined, and I had been working all my life. And when it said 9 o'clock, I was there 10 minutes to 9. And a lot of times the door was locked. So one day at the English department, when I was taking English, I got there at 10 minutes to 9, and of course it was still locked up. So I went to the library, which had just opened, and I just sat down at a table just to wait, killed some time, and there was a kind of a lazy Susan thing there with some books on it. And this book, The Letters of Vincent van Gogh, by Mark Ruskell, was sitting there. I just happened to pull it out and look at it. I didn't know who Van Gogh was. I had never heard of him before. I didn't even know Picasso, who he was, or that he was still alive. That's how little I knew about art. I wasn't there to be an artist. I didn't know about artists, and I didn't care. From where I came from, in a small ranch in San Luis Obispo, California, art was never talked about, and if it ever was mentioned, it was always something done by them, never by us. We didn't do art, they did art. It was something that was done someplace else by other people, and it had nothing to do with the people that I was with, my family, etc. So at any rate, here I am, and at 32 years old, and I pull out this book about Vincent van Gogh. I didn't know who he was, so I just started thumbing through it just to kill some time, and I started reading a few passages. And it literally changed my life. I could not put it down. I never had heard such things, or never had dreamt there was a man that could devote his life to something as this man did, and suffer as he suffered. It was astounding to me. So naturally I checked out the book, and later bought one, and this actually came out in 1962. It's the Letters of Vincent van Gogh, but it's been edited down, so it's mostly letters pertaining to his artwork, to his brother Theo. But he had written 600, 700 letters or something like that, and they're in 3 volumes that came out in 1914 that have all his complete letters, and I've read those. Eventually, I read every letter twice, actually, of the 3 volumes. But this book was the best because it was concentrated. And this is the one I used. I used to carry this book with me everywhere when I was out painting. It was always with me. I was always marked, just like a religious person would carry a Bible. That's the way I felt about it. It's full of passages about art, about being an artist, and the struggles and the sacrifices you have to make. And I find reading it today, which I haven't read it in 30-some years, I found reading it today so that I could talk to you about it, I find that the letters here still have the same impact on me. I'm still fascinated by this man. Even though I went through a Van Gogh period, 30-some years ago, and I haven't been doing that kind of work, his style, in that many years. I still feel the same about the man. I'm going to read a couple little passages here so you get some idea what. For those of you who don't know, he was a painter between 1880 and 1890, just 10 years is all. He died at 37. He shot himself. After he died, he had a very few friends, but this was one painter friend who knew him, but wasn't close to him. Nobody could get close to him because he was so erratic, so dedicated. It's like Martin Luther, the same way. Actually, Vincent van Gogh was a preacher too before he became a painter. But Martin Luther went to a monastery, and he was a Catholic, to a Catholic monastery, and he was so extreme that they didn't want him around because he just made everybody else feel like they were pampered. And that's the same way Van Gogh was when he was a preacher. They finally told him to stop doing that because he was so extreme in his poverty, in his self-discipline, and his self-sacrifice. But here's what one of the artists said: "Whoever has witnessed this wrestling, struggling, and sorrowful existence could not but feel sympathy for the man who demanded so much of himself that it ruined his body and mind. He belonged to a race that produces the great artists." He was a great artist. They knew it. The man knew it. Everyone that could get close enough to him knew it right away when they saw him, because of his dedication and how well he painted. But his paintings were not accepted. They didn't say, "Oh, what a genius," as they do now, and nobody wanted his paintings. He looked like a bad impressionist, and the impressionists were barely making it at that time. They had kind of turned the art world upside down in Paris, and they were starting to get shows, and they were starting to sell their works, and everybody's talking about it. Well, Van Gogh looked like a bad impressionist. It was bad enough that the people were barely accepting the impressionists, which were much finer of work, and his were just like scattered, and they just couldn't take it. It just took another 30 years before people realized how great he was. So this is not an instant kind of becoming an artist. Doesn't mean you're going to be instantly recognized as being some kind of a genius or something. It takes years. It took 11 years after he died before they had a good show of Vincent van Gogh's work. 11 years. It was 24 years before his letters were ever printed, and that's when people really got to know what kind of artist he was. So you see, when I tell you that this takes time and you can't rush it, and you got to, this is a lifetime project. You got to do it while you're, like he did his work while he was alive, and then his basket got pushed out there, and it barely made it because no one pushed it along except his sister-in-law and his brother for a while, and then some other people started picking up on it, and they started moving his basket up. And eventually, it moved into orbit, but it isn't a given.